My apologies for not being there in person today. I'm on a reporting trip for a story I'm currently working on. It's actually a story associated with the paper I proposed for this panel, so I do have a good excuse for my absence. Also, I'll get paid for that story. Lines on my CV don't pay the bills. I'm recording this a few days early, but by the time of this panel, I will be at the ASU GSV Summit. It's an event I've never attended before, one that I've been quite loath to go to, in part because of the reports I hear back about some of the shadiest and most destructive elements in education politics and education business. So I'm going. Here's how the event's sponsor, GSV, the venture capital firm Global Silicon Valley, describes it. Quote, "The summit brings together the most impactful people from diverse constituencies, entrepreneurs, business leaders, educators, policymakers, philanthropists, and university and district leaders to create partnerships, explore solutions, and shape the future of learning." I can't help but notice that students and parents and communities are not mentioned among these constituencies. Education reform happens to them. They are not impactful people, apparently. Also absent from this list, and I think relevant to our purposes here, education researchers. Indeed, every year, and this is now its ninth, the ASU GSV Summit seems to coincide with AERA. And I don't think that this is an insignificant or unintentional scheduling gaffe. If nothing else, it sort of reinscribes this really powerful cultural trope, one that's particularly resonant among Silicon Valley and education reform types. That's that education experts and expertise aren't to be trusted, that research is less important than politics, that the peer review that matters isn't the academic version as much as the story you can get journalists to repeat for you. And any kind of peer process that is important in this framework is networking and power broking. It's who you know, not what you know. It's not how you wield your research as much as how you wield your relationships. It's not to say relationships don't matter in academia, of course they do, but academic networks are significantly less impactful in GSV's terms. Of course, as people in Silicon Valley like to say, venture capitalists don't invest in ideas. They invest in people. I think that overstates the case a lot. Clearly, ideas matter, ideology matters, metaphors matter. The way in which one talks about education matters. The notion that it's broken, for example, or that it needs to be fixed through some market-based mechanism. Ideas shape the products that entrepreneurs build and the policies that reformers promote. Investors might select certain people as their entrepreneurs of choice, or back certain officials as their reformers. But that's because they share ideas. And more importantly, I'd argue, because they share networks. I'm currently wrapping up my year as a Spencer Fellow at the Columbia School of Journalism, and my project involves an exploration of how these networks work, particularly how education technology investors work, where and how they come up with their ideas, how their influence spreads. I'm interested in the shape of the network, who's in it, the money, where's the funding going, the power, right? How do investors and their investments shape policy, the people, but also the stories about the future, right? The EdTech Mafia, I sometimes call it. And this is a nod to the PayPal Mafia, who are those early employees and executives at PayPal who told a particular story about the way in which the finance industry of the future would work, and who've gone on to shape recent Silicon Valley history and business and politics as investors and entrepreneurs. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, Chad Hurley, the founder of YouTube, Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, board member of Facebook, vampire, enemy of the free press, Pierre Omidyar, the founder of eBay, and so on. Venture capitalists are important, increasingly so as Silicon Valley technologies play a more and more powerful role in our personal lives and in our political systems, right? When I use the word investors, though, I also mean the influence of philanthropists. And it's probably worth pointing out that several of the philanthropies founded by tech executives are not the classic family foundation. They're actually venture capital firms. Some are nonprofit, some are for-profit. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, for example, founded by Facebook's founder, is a venture capital firm. It's often talked about like it's a philanthropy, but it's a company. The Emerson Collective, founded by Lorraine Powell Jobs, the widow of Apple's co-founder, is a venture capital firm. As LLCs, they have fewer requirements for transparency than do foundations about where their money goes. You can see, for example, on the Gates Foundation website, who's received education grants, dating all the way back to 1994. I'm guessing that includes many people in the room. We don't really know where CZI's dollars are going. The organization has promised to spend billions in the coming decade on personalized learning. Last time I checked, that's an idea, not a person. But who gets the money is going to be worth paying attention to. How the idea of personalized learning takes shape under the influence of Chan Zuckerberg Initiative dollars and that network. This is important, right? So here's an example of how these investor networks operate. This is what I'm investigating when I'm at ASU GSV Summit. One of GSV's co-founders is Deborah Quazzo. She is one of the most active investors in EdTech. She was briefly on the Chicago Public Schools board. That is until a Chicago Tribune story found that since her appointment, the district had tripled its spending on companies in her investment portfolio. These investments include Dreambox Learning, Class Dojo, and EdSurge. EdSurge is a really important node here, as its investors include almost every firm who's actively investing in EdTech in Silicon Valley, as well as the major philanthropies and venture philanthropies like Gates and CZI. As such, it's really clear that the publication promotes certain stories about the future of schools, certain ideas, and certain people, right? Another co-founder of GSV is, of course, Michael Moe. Moe has a very long history in education financing. When he worked at Merrill Lynch in the 1990s, he helped the school management company Edison Schools prepare for its initial public offering. Edison Schools, that's another one of these interesting nodes. Even though the company is sort of gone now, it still remains a powerful node in the EdTech network. And I mention this in part because the privatization and the financialization of education has a really lengthy history. And it's one that it goes much farther back than this recent spate of Silicon Valley interest in EdTech, right? These networks are well established, even as Silicon Valley wants to associate itself with the new, right? Edison was co-founded by Chris Whittle, whose other companies include Channel One, that advertising-filled TV news provider for schools. Edison Schools' founding partners include names like Chester Finn and John Chubb. The president of its Learn Now division was Jim Shelton, who from Edison went to work as a program manager at the Gates Foundation. He then went to work as Assistant Secretary of Education at the Obama Department of Ed. An aside, his boss, Arne Duncan, is also a venture capitalist now. He works for the Emerson Collective. After working at the Department of Education, Shelton went to work at 2U, an online program management company for higher ed, founded by John Katzman, who previously founded the Princeton Review, another key node, and an investor, surprise, surprise, in EdSurge. Jim Shelton is now the head of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative's education program. CZI has also hired Bror Saxberg, formerly the Chief Learning Officer of Kaplan, owned by Graham Holdings, once the owner of Washington Post, and yes, an investor in EdSurge, as its Chief Learning Officer. It also has hired Katrina Stevens, who worked at the Department of Education under Jim Shelton and who worked at EdSurge as its Director of Learning Sciences. These folks are not at AERA. They are at ASU-GSV. Right? A Director of Learning Sciences is not interested in the research as much as she has to pay attention and navigate the investor network. Right? And that is one future, a very dystopian one, I'd argue, where the future of education technology lies. It's a place in which scholarship and researchers in particular, can be ignored unless the work explicitly endorses the ideas and the politics and the networks of capital. Thank you.